All right, we're going to look at 22 and 23 on the review. So we're still doing quadratics. In this section, you get to pick any method. So if I have a choice, I will factor first because that tends to be fastest. Other than that, if you don't have an x term, you can try square root method, or you can always try quadratic formula. So if I start with A, I want to make sure it is in the correct form. So I'm going to start by moving the 7x over and setting it equal to 0. Now you could do quadratic formula on this one and it wouldn't be horrible. Your A would be 1, your B would be -7, and your C would be 0. All right, so that would be an option, and you're welcome to try that. I'm going to do factoring because what I'm noticing is both of these have an x. And so if I just factor out an x, I get x times x minus 7 equals 0. And then I can set each factor equal to 0. And there's my two answers really quickly. I get a 0 and I get a 7. And so this is why I like factoring. All right, so let's try B. I want to start by putting everything on one side. I'm going to pull that -56 over where it becomes a +56. Now if I do quadratic formula on this, it's got some very large numbers. I could, just may not be my best route. But what I am noticing is everything is even, so maybe if I factor out a 2, this won't be so bad. What is that, a 28? All right, so I want to see if this factors. If it doesn't, I'll do quadratic formula, and if it does, it'll save me some time. So I'm thinking about numbers that multiply to make 28 and add to make 11. And I am thinking 7 and 4. To get a -11, they need to both be negative. So now I'm factored. I set each factor equal to 0. 2 equal to 0 doesn't give me anything. Here we get x equals 7 and x equals 4. So generally factoring is the way to go, but you can always fall back on quadratic formula if you need to. All right, now 23 deals with what's called the discriminant. So the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that is under the square root. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. And what that does is it gives us the type of answer. It doesn't give us the answer, but it tells us what type of answer we have. So for A, I'm going to start by putting this back in standard form. So I'm rewriting my 7z squared. I'm going to bring that -4z over and make it a +4z. And the 6 is staying on the same side. I'm just going to put it at the end. So now I have A, B, and C. All right, so if I want to get my discriminant, I just do b squared minus 4ac. So that will be 4 squared minus 4 times 7 times 6. All right, so that's going to give me 16 minus a really big number. All right, so that comes out to be 168. And I get a -152. So think about if you did the whole quadratic formula, you would get some number plus or minus the square root of -152 over some number. So what we're doing is we're thinking, what happens if we have a negative under a square root? Well, we know that means we have a complex or something with I in it. So you can say two complex answers. You can use answer, solution, root. It all means the same thing. You can also, if you say imaginary or you say two answers with I in it, however you describe it, that's fine. So you can say two complex solutions, two imaginary solutions. But we know if the discriminant's negative, we're going to get I's in our answer. All right, so we'll do the same thing here. Now this is already in the correct order, so this is A, this is B, and this is C. Okay, so B is -8. I'm going to square -8. Minus 4 times 1 times 16. And I end up with 64 minus 64. So this gives me a 0 for a discriminant. So imagine you're doing quadratic formula. You get something plus or minus the square root of 0 over something. So what happens here is this whole thing becomes a 0, and so plus 0 and minus 0 give us the same answer. So when this happens, we only get one answer. And it's not going to have a square root in it, which means it's going to be rational. So we're going to say one rational solution. If you say one real solution, that's okay as well. Really, I want to know that you know if it's a 0, then you're only going to get one answer.